Hey everybody, welcome back to MNM. You're here with your co-host Alex, and the man's so nice we named him thrice. Three first names: Mitchell, Ryan, Howie. Sir, how you doing today?
I'm good, Alex. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We got a really interesting topic today. We're talking about our favorite albums of all time across the
Yeah.
decades, and maybe we'll narrow it down a bit more in the future for everybody, but
Mhm.
per decade, I'd say. But right now, this was a really tough one over the week. When we were
Mhm.
thinking about this to narrow it down, Mitch, what about you? Was it pretty tough, or is this a
Yeah.
pretty broad topic?
I mean, I don't think I necessarily picked my three for sure favorite albums of all time because I think it's hard because, I like music of different genres and different eras. So it's not easy, obviously, to only pick three, but I kind of wanted to mix it up, right? Like I had a couple bands from the 90s, kind of the alternative rock sort of thing, as well as an album that I would say is very different to what I normally listen to, but I really love. And so yeah, it should be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I was surprised at the start when you sent me the one of your albums. It was a
Mhm.
little more grungy than I thought you listened to, but you have a wide taste like I do.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I guess we'll just start there. But
mm,
we wanted to so we sent each other the three albums, sent a couple songs to listen to just to kind of get a little background on the album and the bands and what kind of the big songs were from those records. So the first album I chose was Counting Crows' debut album, August and Everything After. And the reason I chose this album is because I would say it was the album that kind of changed the way I thought about music and listened to music. Because before that, I wasn't really into a wide variety of music. I kind of just listened to like kind of simple, like pop, country, just like hooks. There
like the
was
top
like
40s kind of thing.
kind of, and I would just kind of latch on to like one or two artists, that sort of thing. Whereas listening to that album really made me branch out to listen to other artists, other bands, different types of music that I wasn't listening to before. So I thought it'd be appropriate to include that in this episode for sure. But I actually found out about the album listening to another podcast, Bill Simmons' podcast, and he had on the lead singer, Adam Duritz, who is an extremely smart and articulate guy. And I'd never heard of the band or him or anything, but I just heard the way he talked about the music and how he talked about his career. And I was just like, okay, like I got to listen to it now. I mean, he
Mm.
sounds like a genius, And so I started listening to him a bit, and then a bit more, and then eventually it just clicked, and I was like, oh, this is so good. And I probably don't like it quite as much as I did in that moment because during that time I was like obsessed, with the band and with the album. But I still love it. I still think it's a great album. Um, if anyone kind of enjoys, alternative rock, like it's not a conventional rock album by any means, but it's not grunge really. It's definitely not metal. Like it's kind of just it exists. Like it's a product of the 90s, right? Like alternative scene where it's just different. Like it's hard to really compare it to another band necessarily, but definitely think it's worth a shot. Um, Obviously, the big song from that album is Mr. Jones. I mean, that was
Mhm.
one of the biggest singles from the 90s. Most people have heard of it, even if they don't know they have. You've probably heard it on the radio.
Just the name alone, you
Yeah.
just you kind of it clicks in.
Plus, the song is kind of cool because although it was like a super successful radio hit, it actually has some depth to it, and it's about like it's a true story, kind of like about the guy and when he was in a band before Counting Crows, and just the desire to become a successful musician, really like get famous, right? But then also kind of there's like a melancholy aspect to the song towards
Mhm.
the end where he kind of realizes that being famous isn't going to make you happy. It's not going to give you
Mhm.
everything you want, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of just a product of being a great musician, or at least a successful musician, right?
Yeah, and I see that with a lot of other older songs. Like for example, I'm thinking of Hotel California, kind of similar message.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can check it anytime you want, but you can never leave. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're in this lifestyle, you're stuck. It might not necessarily mean you're happy, but you're there, right?
Yeah. And that's part of it with music, right? It's like you can't really become a super successful popular musician without having to deal with kind of the BS that comes with fame, right?
Mhm.
And one thing before we really get into the album that I must mention is Adam Duritz is a Riz god, an absolute Riz god. If anyone is watching this or listening, look up Adam Duritz. Okay. Now, I'm not the best looking guy in the world by any means, nor is he. Okay. Nor is he. But this guy dated Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox during Friends. So at the height of their like fame and popularity, he dated both of them, as well as a number of other very beautiful celebrities. And it's just he is the ultimate version of the guy who like has the guitar and is kind of like, he's kind of moody, but he's smart, and
Just
it
like
just
brooding in the
I don't know.
corner, playing, just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just playing along the guitar.
this is all meaningless, man. Like, and he even talks like that kind of too. So I found that hilarious when I was like doing a little research into him when I first started listening. I was just like, what? Like, this guy dated Jennifer Aniston in like 1994. Like, what the hell?
Jeez. And
And
that's he fumbled it.
well, he
90 the 90 alternative era faded out, and so did he, I guess. That's
yeah, but like I mean, to date hit her and Courtney Cox at that time, like that's just outrageous. I don't know,
Mhm.
but anyway, let's get to the let's get to the
Back
music.
to
But
music. No, this is
it
good. You
was
like
definitely
the backgrounds of it.
it
I like
was
it.
funny though, because if you see him and you listen to the music, it's just like I don't know, it's all the music, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Like it's definitely the music, and he's probably a smart guy. But anyway, so the album was like very very well received critically. It also did well commercially, like it's multi-time platinum. Um, it had a very distinct sound, I would say. It's hard to describe honestly because it's hard to compare it to other things, just because it's kind of weird.
Mhm.
But I would say it's alternative rock. It doesn't really fit into the other stuff of the 90s. Like it's not Nirvana. Like it's not like, oh, if you like Nirvana, you'll like this, or if you
Mhm.
like Pearl Jam, you'll like it. It's not really that. It's not metal. It's certainly not classic rock. I would say there's some folksy elements to some of the songs maybe, but just like a really really well-rounded album. No bad songs. Like it doesn't really, even if some of the songs aren't my favorite, there aren't any just kind of throwaway songs in the album, where it's just kind of like you could tell they had eight or nine songs and they just needed two
They
more.
needed
So
somewhere to fill it out.
so
Yeah.
they just came up with some lame chorus and three chords or whatever to go with it. But and then of course, like the album did peak at number 4, so it was quite successful, even though they're definitely not like the most famous band from the 90s. And Mr. Jones like became a massive hit. It was one of the most like played songs on the radio in the 90s, and is still played on the radio today. And
Mhm.
I guess why I love the album is like I said before, just it kind of changed the way, like not to sound too like cheesy or anything, but it's true. Like before I listened to the album, I wasn't listening to any sort of like non-popular music, you know. I kind of just listened to whatever my friends listened to, but that like almost brought me into a different like universe of different types of music, indie groups, like it just made me think harder and like seek out good music as opposed to just listening to whatever was like right in front of me, you know?
Yeah, I was the same way as well. Like I got into a lot of different music because of my friends, like who I hung out with, and I just got introduced. And that's why like just everyone hopping on the aux every once in a while, everyone just trying to get their just a few songs, a few playlists out there. So I get to learn. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, what's that? And then I'll see me constantly just writing down well songs on my phone and stuff like that. Or so I'll write them down. And a big thing is I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock. So one of my first album was gonna rein in at Zeppelin 4.
Mhm.
That's the big one. That's my I'd say probably one of my favorite. And the songs that stand out to me, like my favorite ones, Black Dog and Going to California. Those have to be the
Mhm.
two of my favorite. I know ideally they're not the most like popular. Like I know Going to California is not as popular as Stairway. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be like the song from that album. But I found them my favorite because they're my favorite to play on guitar. And that's because I've been playing my whole life, and so just the intro to Black Dog, never forget the airy vocals. Robert Plant is wailing. Like that's
Yeah.
some of my favorite, most powerful intros to a song. It's Black Dog. I love that.
Yeah.
And again, Going to California, one of my favorite songs to play, like finger picking on the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very like, well, you listen to it, Mitch. It's very like, how would you say it? Very like almost elegant song, like very like just like
I
flowing,
yeah.
very delicate in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I'd obviously heard Black Dog. I totally agree. I think it's one of, if not the most iconic, like rock intro to a song, at least classic rock. Just a ridiculous, like Jimmy Page and Robert Plant at their best. And just like the ultimate, like just rocking song,
Mhm.
like that can kind of get you fired up, but it's also like, a good song. And then Going to California, I believe I'd heard some pieces of it before, but I don't think I'd heard the whole thing.
Mhm.
And I really liked it. I thought it was a totally different side to the
Mhm.
band because Plant's vocals are soft, right? Like they're
Mhm.
completely different than his normal, just like, hey, like just like, yeah,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
yelling, like
There's
in
like
that
some things where he'll
high
go in the song a
register.
little bit. You see a
Yeah.
little bit of yelling, but it's mostly that's the folksy part of the song. Like the Zeppelin's just it's folks, blues, and rock, but they're heavy into folk and blues.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. So this is as much as a B side could be on Zeppelin 4. It is a B song, but it's just very more folksy rather than the harder rock that they're known for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was really good. Like, I think it kind of shows how talented the band is.
Mhm.
Just considering, like, you look at those two songs back to back, you might think they're two different bands. Not
Mhm.
that bands don't try new things, but I don't think most bands can execute two completely different, like, styles of music within an album.
Mhm.
And obviously, we can just talk about Led Zeppelin itself. I mean, just an outrageous band. Like,
Mhm.
I think they're probably the only band, and you can agree or disagree, feel free, like,
Yep.
to point something out,
Of
but
course.
they might be the only band that has like top five like instrumentalists at each position,
Mm.
like of all time, potentially. Like
Yep.
Jimmy Page, one of the best guitarists of all time. Robert Plant, one of the most iconic rock singers of all time.
Mhm.
John Paul Jones, great bassist. And obviously John
Pianist. And,
Bonham,
oh yeah, and John
John
Bonham. Yeah.
Bonham on drums, which I think most lists or most people in terms of rock and roll would consider like him or Keith Moon kind of the
Hmm.
two of the all-time great drummers, right?
Yeah, and it's I just again, I can say so much about the band, but what I like about it is the simplicity of the meaning behind the music too. Because a lot of days, a lot of people try to do like alluding to a bunch of different things, and it's music. But at the end of the day, like their song Black Dog, I correct me if I'm wrong here, but I heard the how they named it is they're writing the song, and you think about it, it's about like heartbreak and romance at the end of the day, right? Black Dog. But they're saying, how do we name it? And apparently they were recording outside their house one day, or they're outside their house and they saw a black dog walking by, and they're like, oh, Black Dog,
Hmm.
name it Black Dog. Going to California, pretty self-explanatory. It's about you going to California, what you see, you're right. So it's just they
Mhm.
sing a lot about you know love and drugs and rock. That's just
Yeah,
more
that's
simple
rock and
messaging
roll.
back then, which I love, right? So
Yeah, and that's definitely a part of like rock and roll. Like even if you talk like the Stones or the Beatles, the music was obviously really good and sometimes quite complicated, quite difficult to play, certainly.
mhm,
But typically the lyrics and the songs were very simple,
mhm,
but they like a lot of songs, um, you can kind of come up with your own metaphors and your own
mhm,
kind of conclusions about what they mean, what you think they mean, what they could mean, right? And that's kind of the beauty of music is ultimately it's open to interpretation, right? Like one of those songs could be about anything really. It's up to you, obviously the band might have their own explanation, but I do think musicians like that though too, a lot of them just kind of leaving it up to the listener to come up with what, what the song's about, or what it means to them,
Yeah. And do you think that makes it like more timeless? And that's why we still
Yes,
listen to them nowadays, like today? Because I feel like
for
some
sure.
songs nowadays are dating themselves in terms of talking about specific cultural things. Like someone's like, oh, hit me up on my phone. They're talking about
Yeah.
phones or certain slang used now, whereas
Hmm.
those songs, no, they don't have a lot of like culturally specific or time specific slang and um stuff that in that time. So there's just timeless music, which is why we're still talking about it today. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because obviously, like, a lot of those songs from that era, they're still loved today, and a lot of it's probably because it is simple and anyone can relate to it, kind of thing, to the
mm,
message, and to what they're trying to say, and they don't get too, bogged down in specifics, and that it's more just kind of a general, or like a broad kind of idea, right? And
mm,
just nice, like, nice melodies, and and that sort of thing, and harmonies for certain bands, obviously, which isn't as common today, like just kind of classic music that people enjoy and have enjoyed for a really long time, right? Throughout the world, all different
yep.
types of music utilize melodies and harmonies, and that sort of thing, which has kind of gone away a little bit,
That's all
or
you
they
need to
just,
unite people, man. That's all you need.
yeah. Well, I guess that's a good time to go to my next album. By the way, what we should do, so you mentioned um going to California and Black
Mm,
Dog. So if somehow people haven't heard Black Dog, or going to California, they may not have heard, definitely check that out.
mhm.
Just to get a little taste of the album. And then for the first album that I was mentioning, Counting Crows, I'm not gonna go with Mr. Jones, because I think most people would probably
Oh
already
yeah.
hear it,
Mhm.
have heard of it. So I'm gonna go with Omaha and
Mhm.
Rain King. Those are the two songs. Rain King, not ranking. Rain
Rain
King.
King. Okay.
Um, so yeah, those would be the two songs I would recommend people listen to just to give the album a shot.
Mm.
Now the second album, and I wanted to mix it up. I didn't want to just have all classic rock or all alternative rock or whatever. Kind of wanted to mix it up, and I would say this album is like the most unique of the ones that I listen to in terms of my own music taste. Like I wouldn't say there's another album that I like, or that I would consider one of my favorites that's similar to this one. Just for some reason, it all came together, and it it just worked. It clicked for me. I just really enjoyed it, and it's Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves. It came out in 2017.
Mm.
It was extremely well received critically. Um, she won, or the album in her won 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year, any genre, not just like country
Wow.
or folk or pop, whatever, like
That's why I have
Album
heard
of
of
the
her.
Year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, it certainly was well received critically. And one thing I love about it, and it's something I really like about musicians, and I think a lot of the popular musicians nowadays have kind of gotten away from this, but she wrote all the songs on the album, all 13, and she co-produced it. So it was really like her vision, her kind of, her ideas, and what she wanted to put into an album, as opposed to like, a songwriting team coming up with songs and just kind of giving it to her. It was really personal, and I think that comes out in the songs and in the album. There's a lot of like personal references you can tell, that she makes about her life, kind of. And I find it very relaxing, honestly. If I were to just put in a word, like relaxing and kind of satisfying. Like, it's not a rock album, it doesn't get you fired up,
Mhm.
but it's also not like, a depressing album, or one that really makes you like think a lot. It's just kind of like a nice, really well executed, chill, good album. And if I were to say like what genres, it's definitely country, but it's not. If you don't like country, don't just like cross this off. Like, give it a shot. It's not like country do you hear on the radio,
We got
or
alternative
like
country here, everybody. So we'll definitely have to check that out. Yeah.
and it's not like Waylon Jennings, although I like Waylon. It's not like, 70s country either. It's like country, folk, and pop, I would say,
Mhm.
kind of mixed in. And I just think the production is fantastic. and there's really no skips. There's a lot of really good songs in the album with the classic, like I would say the thing that country music has, that's kind of influenced other genres as well over time, is the melodies in country music. There's a lot of good melodies, like to choruses and that other genres have used. Even like, well, I shouldn't bring this guy up, but like Kanye even talked about in his song Heartless, which was like a massive song from the 808s and Heartbreak album, how like that song really is a country song, like with the melodies, like that's what kind of inspired it. And I just thought it was interesting how, like, because a lot of people don't like country music nowadays, and I totally get it, because a lot of the new country music that's like on the radio and that is just like really bad, like really just like cheap, like kind of junk food music, you know.
Mass produced. Oh, junk food music.
Yeah.
I like that term, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like potato chips. It's like, oh, this is good, and then it, you know, doesn't, like,
You're hungry 20 minutes later. You're
yeah,
like,
exactly.
where is it?
So but like true country music, I would say the melodies are what kind of separates it and what has influenced other genres, and those are great in this album, as well as the production is really good. So yeah, it was something I did not expect. Like I found it one day and I just started listening to it, and it just like I hooked onto it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'd recommend people check it out. You know, maybe it won't be your favorite album, but I certainly think it's worth a listen. And it was obviously really well received by critics. Not that, you know, that has to matter, but it obviously means, you know, a good amount of people did enjoy it. And if I was going to recommend two songs, it's tough because there's a lot of songs I enjoy, but in terms of like the storytelling and that I like from the album, I would say Slow Burn is one song that I would recommend. And then for one of the hits, like one of the kind of maybe more digestible songs for people who may not be into that style of music, would be Butterflies or Rainbow. Those are both very good songs.
I do know butter. Give me a little sing, Mitch. We won't get demonetized.
Oh, I know.
Give me a little. I recognize.
I'll save it for the listeners. You gotta go check it out.
Okay, and that's gonna bug me because I know I think I know.
I could potentially sing another song, but I can't sing that. It's too high. It's too high for my voice.
I should be over all the butterflies. I should be over all the butterflies.
No.
Okay, because I'm completely off. I've never heard.
Yeah.
Okay,
you'll have to listen to it. I think that's like
out.
Halsey or something. No, don't edit it. Leave it in.
Yeah.
Leave it in.
No,
I think that's. I don't even know who that is, but that's like a pop song. This is a pop song. Okay. Different.
You said it was more like alternative country pop-ish.
It's more like country folksy pop.
Okay,
like,
okay.
Sort of
so
thing.
I just put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah.
There we go. So, and then I'm gonna step on some toes here. This is just I've been outing myself here. I've never been a huge fan of country. That was the one thing where I grew up. Actually, in my house, we're like, no country. We didn't like it. But I've been, again, when Mitch, when I met you, it was, you listened to a bit more of that, and so I got exposed to it. And I listened, and I said, that's not bad. Like I started enjoying some of the stuff. But I do understand that I was also exposed in university to a lot of that, like junk food country too, like a lot of that, like that pop. So like you're saying, there's a lot of those like recycled melodies and lyrics sometimes.
Well, I think I would say, like, yeah, so when I was saying the melodies, what I mean by that is like Johnny Cash type melodies and like George Strait and that sort of thing. The melodies used in like pop country, I would call it, so like kind of mainstream radio country, those are like, they just recycle the exact same every single time. Like it's
A minor C. There you go. That's all you need.
So we don't need to rag on pop country. There's nothing wrong with it. If you like it, hey, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters. And if you're a musician that makes people happy, that's kind of what the point is, right? People enjoy your stuff. But
and that's why I will never, like, back then I would like crap on some genres, but now I'll be, hey, it's just not for me. I don't understand some of it, but hey, do what I listen to, man.
And I think, and there's definitely a lot of people, if you aren't from like, you know, the South or somewhere where country music is really popular, where, you know, a lot of people are just like, no country. And I understand that if you're basing it off of what's played on the radio. But if you do look up, you know, some kind of like not even independent, but just non like super mainstream country musicians, there's a lot of good ones. It's very grounded kind of music. It is on the simpler side for sure, but I think there's some beauty in that. Like I enjoy, you know, acoustic music, and I think that's kind of the, the genesis of what music is just like, singing ability, melodies, the lyrics, what they mean. And I think acoustic sets are kind of a perfect transition maybe to your next album, one that I listened to a couple songs from, a brilliant acoustic, well, not just acoustic, but he's certainly a great acoustic musician.
Yeah, natural transition here. We have the mellow man himself, Jack Johnson. So he is, I grew up listening to him. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. This is the one that my friends and I will sit by the campfire, listen to him by the beach, wherever, like just very, he's the chill, I'd say the chill Hawaiian vibe. He is, yeah, he's acoustic guitar, acoustic pop, and I'd say alt pop at sometimes, but mostly acoustic pop is what I'd classify him as. Everyone will probably know his song "Upside Down," the one on the Curious 2004 Curious George soundtrack. That's how I got into him. I was a kid and I listened to that. And funny enough, he doesn't recognize that album as one of his 9 because he says it's a kid's album, so he doesn't classify that. I'd say check it out. It's called "Sing Along Lullabies." He has some pretty good ones on there, but I have to say his most popular album is called "In Between Dreams," and that's the one where most of the people know if they know Jack Johnson. My favorite, and I surprised some of my friends when I said this, was I think his 3rd album, second or third, called "On and On." And there's a song called "Rodeo Clowns" and "Holes to Heaven," and those are the 2 that I love playing guitar, but it's one of those that just every time I hear it, they're unskippable songs. Like, you need to listen to them.
Yeah.
"Rodeo Clowns" is a mouthful lyric wise, but it's that one's but it's so fun once you get like the cadence down. It has like I'd say more like a Bare Naked Ladies kind of like vocal vomit, maybe, let's say that. And then "A Holes to Heaven" is a great one. Holes to Heaven is metaphor for stars. So very simple message about him being out in nature, and the line was, "There would be so many fewer questions," or there was so many fewer questions when stars were just the holes to heaven. So when we just thought they were just the holes to heaven, simpler life. It's kind of ties into his whole mellow man style. It's cool. He's a very good artist, and I'd say if you just want to sit back, find yourself campfire, beach, relaxing, this is your guy. So
yeah, and I obviously knew Jack Johnson. I think I knew because of our mutual friend, who shall remain nameless, just in case he doesn't want to be on our super successful podcast that has millions of listeners.
He will be arriving sometime in the near future. We'll have to speak
about that. That's breaking news. I hadn't even heard of that.
Yes, I haven't told you before, but that's
I haven't even heard that. Well, that's
confirmed.
Good news.
He will be on, but we will not tell the viewers when or where or when.
All we can say is he is the best musician since Beethoven. And I say that half jokingly, but he is the best musician we know. Very talented guy. I'm sure when he comes on, we can plug what music he's working on right now and that. But very talented musician, very knowledgeable. So I'm sure that'll be a good episode. But you'll have to tune in to find out.
Yeah, and he actually helped me with my love for Jack Johnson, because I played with him for years, and he is as big, or if not a bigger, Jack Johnson fan than I am, and so we'll get him on.
And that's how I found out about him. Like we would, be in the car. Like he would drive me sometimes to like baseball games and that, and so he'd be playing Jack Johnson. So I had heard some of his songs for sure. I hadn't heard these 2, Rodeo Clowns and Holes to Heaven, but I like both of them. I thought Rodeo Clowns, both were kind of acoustic type sounding songs, wouldn't you say? Particularly Rodeo Clown, which is what Jack Johnson's known for. He kind of really uses that guitar. Like, I feel like when he does it live, he almost uses it as a drum as well, kind of like different things, where you're like finger picking and then you're like slapping the neck kind of thing. Really creative artist, clearly. And a unique one, I would say. I don't really know any other artist who makes similar music that's as popular, at least, as he is. But when I listen to Rodeo Clowns, one thing I made a note of was that he's almost rapping in the
He
verses.
he almost raps. Like he wants. I feel some parts of him wants to be a rapper because like some of his other songs he sings really quickly, and he does some soft rock stuff too. Like he's not
Mm.
just the super mellow man, but he has more upbeat stuff. But generally speaking, it's more of that chill
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, he's yeah, like you're saying.
And I thought there's definitely like an island vibe to the song,
Mhm.
like maybe like a little even reggae influence
Yeah.
potentially with some of it.
Mhm.
So very good. I liked it.
Well, he lives in
Holsta,
Hawaii.
okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Mhm.
For at least like an island type sound,
Mhm.
music and drums and that. And then Holds to Heaven, I like that one as well. I don't remember which one I like more, but I like both.
Mhm.
One thing I also noticed was they're both shorter songs. I think less than 3 minutes, which I enjoy
Mhm.
because I think a lot of songs, especially older songs, will just run on for like longer than necessary, and it's
The
kind of
power
just like,
ballads, man. That's
fellas, like
yeah.
fellas, we're good. Like this is a 3 to 4 minute song. It doesn't have to be 7 minutes. We
Mhm.
don't need a minute and a half, and we'll get to a song later that I had chosen that's kind of like that, where it's a great song. I love it, but it doesn't need to be 6.5 minutes. So we'll
Mhm.
get to that. We'll get to that later. But the other thing I liked about Whole 7 was I found it was quite descriptive.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, I was kind of like being in nature, and I thought it was very descriptive, but not in a like not too descriptive in that it was annoying. Like it maintained its flow and kind of what the melody and what the rhythm of the
Mhm.
verses were. But it was cool because it was almost like he was telling a story,
Yeah.
setting the scene. But yeah, so now I guess we will get to that song I was mentioning
Yep.
with my next album, which is an Oasis album, but not the one most people would know. This
Mhm.
is their debut album, Definitely Maybe.
Mhm.
So when Oasis was coming up, first things first, anyone, if you're at all a fan of Oasis at all, and you enjoy music and you enjoy documentaries, watch their documentary. It's on Amazon Prime in Canada, or Prime Video. It's called Supersonic, Oasis Supersonic. And it's just a must watch if you like music. A really well done documentary, and it really lets you understand kind of their rise, because it starts out at the beginning of the band and then ends when it's only a couple years in, when they kind of peaked, because they were like a shooting star almost. Like it was
Mhm.
so quick when they went from unsigned to like the biggest gig in UK history, which is where the documentary ends, which was
They
like
just came in.
300,000 people for 2 nights, just them. It wasn't a festival.
They just came in faster than a cannonball, man.
Yeah. If you Yeah, that's a good reference. We won't even explain it. You just have
No,
to know what
you
that
gotta know.
reference
Gotta know.
was to. But so one thing I really liked about the album, if you are familiar with Morning Glory, that's obviously the what's the story. Morning Glory is the most popular one of the biggest albums ever, or at least certainly since the 90s. I would say this album is more edgy. It's a little bit more punk.
Mhm.
It's not a punk album, but it's got a little punk elements to it, because like the band, that's kind of what they were. They were punks. Like they were like so cocky and brash and arrogant, and it's why a lot of people hated them and maybe still do. But I almost find it endearing. Just like they were all guys from like council estates in Manchester, so like government housing, right?
Mhm.
Were unemployed, had zero prospects of anything really. They weren't going to
Mhm.
university. They didn't. All they wanted to do was become, like, they were a band. All they did was rehearse, and that's all they really wanted to do. And eventually they did it and became one of the biggest bands, at least since the 90s, but really one of the biggest bands of all time. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of that probably was because of the attitude. And that definitely comes out in this album. If you go through it, there's a lot of good songs, and also some unique songs you wouldn't really think fit, but are creative and catchy, which I enjoy. Um, the lead singer Liam, his vocals were outrageous on this album. Like he really sings with like his soul. Like he puts everything into his songs, especially if you watch him perform live. And kind of as he got older, the lifestyle and the way he sings, his style caught up in terms of like the sound,
Mhm.
in his
Yeah.
voice. So that first album, the first two, but that first album when he was like 21 and the voice is just like perfect, even though he
Mhm.
does sing very kind of raspy and loud and heavy, you know?
Yeah, because I did hear them. I did see a live, like a performance of theirs. No, I wasn't there live, but saw a recording of them live, and
Mhm.
the vocals just weren't there when they were a little older. It was
Mhm.
like you're saying, his voice is raspy, and I know they have to save their voice on tour and stuff. They have to sing lower harmonies to save their voice, but at the end of the day, it was just even just the tone was off for me
Mhm.
a little bit when
Yeah.
they're older, and that happens, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you're doing the grungier your stuff, right? You're gonna take a toll on your voice, right?
Yeah. And like a lot of people probably find Oasis because they've only heard that second album as kind of like a softer band,
Mm,
especially considering the other bands that were in the 90s, like grunge and like new metal bands like Korn and like
yeah,
Rage Against the Machine and
yeah.
that.
Fish.
So they were like, oh, Fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the opposite. Yeah, so they might have been considered softer, but if you watch any of their live performances, even when they're younger, like even like Champagne Supernova, any of those
Mm.
soft songs, like the way Liam sings, like he gives it all, like every single song. So makes sense. That combined with drinking every night, smoking and cocaine and everything that comes with being a rock star, like
Not in the
they
90s
were.
for Rockstar.
And even Dave Grohl, because Liam's still touring on his own.
Mhm.
The band broke up in like 2009, and Dave Grohl had even said like that, like Liam Gallagher's like probably the last like true living rock star, like that's still kind of going, you
Mm.
know, rock star in the sense of like the attitude mixed with the singing ability and the band as well as just the like the shenanigans kind of
Yep.
that came with it, right? Because that's what a rock band is. Like
Mm.
a rock band, a record, um like a recording studio and like agents and that should be kind of concerned about rock bands,
Mm.
like because of their behavior and that, just in terms of like recklessness, right? Like that's kind of
What I'm
what
thinking
being a
about is
rock and roll band is.
Motley Crue comes to mind. I'm thinking of
Yeah,
that
for
and the whole
sure.
behind the scenes stuff. We could get into that later, but that's what
Hmm.
I'm thinking of when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And we don't need to get into the history of the band, but they broke up obviously in like 2009, and
Mhm.
the brothers have not spoken since. So
Wow.
a very nice story. But I think eventually they'll get back together because the money will just be outrageous because they've really caught on with young people. Like it was like they skipped a generation and then our generation they become big again.
They're
But
big. They're big in now. Yeah, they're getting
you know,
just climb back, and then the whole joke
and in
about their
England,
most famous song. Yeah,
in England, they are massive. Like people don't
really.
realize how big they are in England. They are massive. Like everyone knows who they are, whether they love them or not, you know.
Mm.
But yeah, I guess so. A couple songs that I had you listen to were "Slide Away," which is maybe my favorite Oasis song. It's one of the most common answers. Like if you ask like a real Oasis fan who's listened to multiple albums, because it's like it's a love song, but it's a lot heavier than I would say most love songs. Like it's a power ballad, but it's really like power. Like there's no
Mm.
real. It's not like one of those power ballads where there's like piano or something like that, right? Like a really soft section of the song. It's just kind of heavy, and Liam's vocals are incredible. So I would definitely recommend that one. And then the other song that I really liked from the album that I had you listen to was "Cigarettes and Alcohol."
Mhm.
Um, just like I thought the intro is great, as well as like I think I think the song itself, like the message is perfect for young kind of punk. Not that they were punk, but they themselves were punks in
Mhm.
terms of like the message of the song basically like the simple things in life is going to be what brings you joy. Like you can search for as long as you want to find like happiness or whatever, and in the end you're just running a circle, and you'll realize like just the simple things in life are what you enjoy. So for them it was cigarettes and alcohol, which you know pretty good. A lot of people like it, right?
Mm. Yeah, and I just was listening to
Those
the choruses
substances.
of those, and that was I get the grunge from it. That's what it was. It was this, like you're right, just the more hard rock. Whereas Oasis, I know them from Champagne Supernova, Wonderwall,
Hmm.
Live Forever. Like those songs were those are the more softer, hopeful ballads. You
Yeah.
could say, or this is their out of the gates debut, right? So they're like they like more rock. So
Mhm. And Live Forever is on this album, so it really is a great album. Like there's so many good
oh
songs.
yeah.
And I chose this one instead of Morning Glory because less people would know about it, and I think it deserves, like, I think it's on a similar level to What's the Story, Morning Glory. It's just a bit heavier, like the songs are, and they're more like, as opposed to just kind of like hopeful, nice ballads, which I love. Like that's why they're so famous.
Mhm.
It's more like a little bit more gritty and just kind of down to earth, like a little bit. Um, and so the funny thing about Cigarettes and Alcohol is the music, at least the intro for sure, is a complete ripoff of another song um, called "Get It On" by T-Rex. I'm
Really?
not familiar with the band, but if you listen to it after, it's an exact ripoff. But that song itself is a ripoff of "Little Queenie" by Chuck Berry. So
It's
it's
just going
kind
back
of
and back, isn't it?
it's that's just kind of just what music is. It's everyone stealing from each other. No one's ever come up with an original song. Everything is based off something you've heard. Um, and as long as the people are getting paid their correct royalties, then it's fine, obviously. Like, you don't want musicians getting ripped off, right? Like
No.
someone
Yeah.
stealing from them. But as long as they get the royalties and the money from that, then it's fair game, But I just thought it was funny because when I was researching that song, because it is a ripoff of that one song, I knew that, but I didn't know that song was a ripoff of Chuck Berry, who is one of the most influential rock musicians of all time.
Oh,
Certainly,
iconic.
Chuck
Yeah,
Berry.
it's I did not put him on my top albums. I love Chuck Berry,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think like, do you want to go to the next album, or you want to talk more about Oasis?
No, I think that's good. Yeah,
You're
I
there.
just recommend those two songs, and I'd listen to the whole album. There's a lot of good songs on it, but yeah,
Mhm.
let's get to your album. A bit more of a classic band, I would say.
It's a bit more classic band. We're gonna go back a few decades. I was struggling to think of some of the newer stuff I listened to that I thought outweighed this album, but I have to say the next one album I was going to talk about is "Some Girls" by the Stones. So 1978. Um, one of my favorite Stones albums, but the songs that really stand out is "Miss You" and "Beast of Burden." So I know "Beast of Burden" is the one that people probably know most, like out of all of them. Like if you think of the Stones, you'd think of um, maybe "Can't You Hear Me Knocking," "Beast of Burden." You think of "Brown Sugar," um, "Start Me Up." Those are the huge
Mhm.
ones.
Painted Black,
Paint,
Satisfaction,
Painted
so
Black,
many.
Satisfaction. Actually, those are probably more popular. Yeah, but Painted Black, you see, and
Yeah, you were getting into some deep cuts.
I was "Can't You Hear Me Knocking" was I got introduced to the Stones with that song, and that's probably not as big, uh, but Painted Black, and there's something I want to talk to you about, Mitch, was the like this resurgence in older music.
Mhm.
Because you see Painted Black, I don't know if anybody's seen the new Netflix show Wednesday. They played a rendition of Painted Black in the first episode, and
Mhm.
it was her playing on a cello. She was playing Painted Black, and I'm sitting there listening. I'm like, hold on, what? Go back. And I was like, oh no shit, she's playing Painted Black. You see it in multiple other movies like Black Adam. I know they played Painted Black as well. You see the Immigrant Song by Zeppelin in uh, ooh,
I think I heard it in a
Thor
car commercial or
Ragnarok.
something.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Thor
Well,
Ragnarok.
see,
So
that's the thing
as
is
well.
these old rockers, they're selling their music now, like their
Mhm.
catalog for like 2, 3, 400 million.
It's
And then
ridiculous.
it's
Yeah.
just anyone can pay for the rights now. So it's
Mhm.
everywhere. I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed. I saw like a Hyundai commercial, or never mind, I saw a car commercial. No brand. I don't remember the
No, no
brand.
brand, but
And I heard Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, and I'm
oh
just
no
like,
way.
no, like I love the song. It's like this shouldn't be in a damn car commercial. This is such a great song from, like, in my opinion, like probably the greatest rock guitarist of all time. Like, how is this in a car commercial?
But
That's so
and
corporate,
but if that's the thing, is that worth it to see maybe like a 20-year-old a few years from now starting to like hum and sing that song out in
Mm.
public, and you're like, whoa, how do you know that song? You're like, oh, it's a car commercial. You're like, no. And then would you be okay with that if this music lives
I
on, or
mean,
would you be like, it's tarnished now?
people
No.
people can find music however they want, you
Yeah.
know, like
It's just kind of a little
ultimately
bit, you're like,
if they
oh,
find the music it's great, but I find car commercial particularly offensive
yeah.
for Hendrix. Like, come on,
That's
man.
where you
Like
draw the line, is
you got to
car
go
commercial. No.
do a little bit of digging. Like, come on, like a car commercial, my God. But
But but you see what I'm saying about like the resurgence of this older music? Like, do you think
mhm.
what do you think is I have some reason, like I think so, but what do you think a reason behind that is? People just searching for alternatives and
Well, I mean, we're probably going to get to this in an episode pretty soon, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But I would say, like bands like the Stones, why? Well, first of all, it's good music. That's
Mhm.
number one. It's good music. That's not to say there isn't good music now, but what I would say is the popular music now, like if you look at the charts in the 70s and 80s or 60s is like Beatles, Stones, Zeppelin, like whoever, Janis
Mhm.
Joplin, like whoever, Hendrix, like just great musicians, great bands, right?
Mhm.
Now the charts are like super commercial, like not really musicians where music lovers, even today, like people our age, we know a lot of people who love music. Even like the modern artists that we listen to aren't really on the charts, right?
Mhm.
So there isn't that um like popularity necessarily for a lot of modern rock bands or modern musicians who make alternative music to what
Mhm.
kind of just like the mainstream pop music is. So I guess people, because they don't know how or where to find kind of good music that's different than what's kind of just like forced to them, they revert to like classic rock, right?
Mhm.
Or just music from 70s and 80s and the 60s. Like I would consider myself that, where I don't really like kind of mainstream pop music, but I'm also not that interested in like listening to 100 different bands that aren't very popular and hoping I like some of them
Mhm.
when I know there's this giant catalog of great music from a different era that I like. So I
Mhm.
kind of just do that, which is a little bit lazy, but I think a lot of people are probably in a similar boat to me in that sense, you know.
And I completely get that. It's I'm the same way. I grew up with this music, and I'm discovering more and more as I just dive deeper and deeper. But I find music nowadays, a lot of it's hitting almost like a plateau in a sense of creative development. And
And
I can get shit on for this, but I see like over the decades, see 60s, 70s, 80s, there's more distinct sounds that keep evolving in this era, right? In these eras. You had like 70s had more funk, right? You had more funk, there's more in the mainstream. Then you had the 80s brought in more of the tech and the synths and the
mhm.
power ballads. And there's different subgenres and all that stuff. But then you get 90s, you have the alternative rock, you have the more grungy, edgier stuff. You had the 2000s, which is the more, you had a return of this more like lighter pop stuff as well. And
Mhm.
we did have some like EDM and all that stuff, but then I feel
I
like
feel
2010s, we're hitting kind of a plateau. Because in the last like 10, like 15 years, I don't see a huge spike in like different sounds, like completely different sounds, like,
I think the difference now is the business side has taken over so much,
mhm,
like recording companies and that. It's just like you notice it in other aspects of life too, even like sports, where we've actually become too smart in terms of being efficient
mhm,
and making money, where it's affecting the product. So you look at music. I agree with what you're saying,
mhm.
but there's probably people listening who are like, you just haven't heard of this and this, which is true.
Fair, yeah.
But the thing is, in the past, you didn't have to strain your neck trying to find a cool new band or sound. It was just available. Like you'd hear on the radio or you'd go to your record, your record
Mhm,
shop, you'd see what was selling, a lot that week. So
mhm,
it's not to say music now is worse, even though I don't listen to a lot of current music. I think what's worse is the record companies have just made it totally corporate and like boiled music down to an algorithm almost that
mhm.
people will listen to. So that's the problem. Like I blame like record companies and that sort of thing, and maybe even like maybe streaming, whatever,
Mhm.
as opposed to like musicians. Because there's no way we just have no, like, way less talented musicians. We probably have more talented musicians than we had back then,
Mhm.
because those bands and artists inspired later generations to play guitar like you,
Mhm.
or to sing, right? Or to look at other bands and artists. So I totally agree with what you're saying. There isn't really a distinct sound now. Um, I would say right now, I would say the only genre that's really like kind of improved or evolved maybe is probably hip hop. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of overtaken as the main genre, which still, like, there's a lot of popular hip hop that's not very good, but there is a lot of good stuff as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, to go to your point, like why we don't really see like great kind of, like, doesn't seem like there's a distinct kind of sound or style or genre nowadays. I think it's mainly just because of like kind of greed of these like record companies just trying to control everything and make money, as opposed to letting artists, like, taking a chance on an artist and just letting them
Mhm.
create, whether it sells or not,
And
you
keep
know.
seeing a cycle of the same stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's best in music is just discovering new stuff, and that's why with these albums you're showing me, like I have more music to listen to, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
learn, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And that could be something we try later too, is like try to find great albums of the last 5 or 10 years, because they're out there. They're
Mhm.
definitely out there. We just how do you find it unless you really go digging,
Yeah.
you know?
We find them
Or
for you guys. That's the
yeah.
point.
But yeah, so going back to Rolling Stones, man, did we go on a tangent there. But that's good.
No.
That's, hey,
That's the
give
point.
the people what they want. They want us. They want Wayne and Garth, digging in deep to the music industry.
Oh yeah.
There's gonna be record companies sending letters to our houses after this episode. Like,
Copywriting. Or sending us talk about this, talk
yeah,
about this.
just being like, if you ever talk about us again, like, you're gonna get whacked. But anyway,
So,
so
oh, sorry, I
Rolling
was gonna say,
Stones.
what was you? Yeah, Rolling Stones. Miss
Yes.
You or Beast of Burden? What did you like better? That's a tough one, but
I listened to both. I'd heard a bit of Beast of Burden.
mm,
I don't know. I liked both. I thought for Miss You, one thing I noticed though, it seemed like there were a lot of different parts of the song, if that makes sense, in terms of like the music changing, kind of the rhythm change. Like
mm,
it wasn't like kind of one riff or one lick and sort of just, drum beat like the whole time. It changed quite a bit throughout the
mm,
song, if that makes sense.
yep.
Um, I mean, Keith Richards, like, to
Oh yeah.
me, Keith Richards is the Rolling Stones. Like,
Mm,
obviously, Mick Jagger's an iconic frontman. Charlie Watts was a great drummer, but like, in terms of like songwriting and that, and what makes the Stones, it's Keith Richards. And
mm,
I said, he was in his bag with these two songs. I'll tell you
yeah.
some of the riffs he came up with. In Beast of Burden, I particularly enjoyed, I think, the music, like
Hmm.
the guitar, and I think there's like that one is more conventional of a song, I think,
Yeah.
where it's like a lick or a riff that kind of goes
Carries
throughout the
drives the
song,
song. Yeah.
that drives the song exactly, and I really enjoyed that. So two very different songs.
Mhm.
I might have heard Beast of Burden. I definitely hadn't heard Miss You, but I need to listen to more Stones for sure.
Mhm.
So
But
it's good to get your, dip your toe in the water with something like
yeah,
this.
and what I loved about last thing about the Stones is what I loved about Miss You, um, is it's a very bass driven song, and that was just like the bass lick is the thing that carries it through, and plus just the horns in the song too. Like I love it when songs can like utilize just like an orchestra, just and
Mm-hmm.
not even just full orchestra, just like the few, like you have the horns, you have saxophones, trumpets, like that in classic rock is just what makes a huge difference for me and stands out to a conventional four-piece band is when you can add that stuff in, like a saxophone solo Miss You. That's the thing that blows me away in that song when I'm listening to it. Um, and you don't hear that a lot in the conventional four-piece band, right? So
Mm-hmm. That was one other thing that I thought when I was listening to the songs, was just like, man, the Stones were really creative, like really ahead of
mm,
their time. I think, like, there's a lot of good bands obviously from that era, but a lot of them were kind of like one trick ponies, or like, I don't want to send shots, but like
you're not
something
gonna
like
reduce the bands, yeah.
AC/DC, like, kind of every song is the same. Let's be
They,
honest.
they,
Like,
they, they had a distinct sound that worked and they stuck with it, but they
and they
didn't they
are
didn't divulge
massive.
from it. They didn't divert. Yeah, they didn't diverge.
And
Sorry.
they are massive. So good for them.
Yeah.
No hate to AC/DC, but like, just in terms of like Rolling Stones they were blues, they were like rock, they were pop, they did different things throughout their albums. And I think they're kind of known for maybe not having a particular elite album. They just have a ton of great music throughout, like because their albums were almost concept albums, some of them.
Yeah.
So some of them were kind of like, not sure about that, but that's the beauty of it. They took chances, right? They try to be creative, which that's what you want from artists, right? So so I enjoyed it, but yeah, I think we had some really good albums today. A good variety. We had like acoustic Jack Johnson, classic rock, Zeppelin and Stones, little 90s alternative rock, Counting Crows and Oasis, and then my country folk pop, Casey Musgraves album that I love. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have heard some of them, some of the songs at least, but we really enjoyed those albums. So definitely recommend giving them a shot. I'm sure we'll do this again. I mean, I can think of a lot of other albums I love that were tough to leave out of this 3, And,
it was tough. And yeah, any honorable mentions though? We won't get into them, but any kind of like a few that just missed the cut kind of thing.
One for me was just like choosing which Oasis album, like that's kind of an obvious one.
Just so because Oasis that's the one you want to talk about. Yeah.
Well, that was like, because there's the obvious choice, right? It's a bit like, I'm sure when you're thinking with the Stones, like which album do I pick? Not that I'm saying Oasis is the Stones. I'm just saying the choice between albums of a band you really like, right? Especially one where, like, What's the Story, Morning Glory is the massive, massive album that people probably have heard of, but I wanted to go with something a little different. Maybe people hadn't heard of it, and I think it's a similar level. I think people should give it a shot, but we'll have to do it again. There's obviously loads of albums we'd love to talk about. So yeah, for sure. If you enjoyed the show, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and feel free to send us any ideas or comments on what we said. Feel free to roast us if you didn't like some of our opinions. We can take it, but that's all for today. We'll be back with another episode next week.
We got more music for you, and keep on listening, everybody.
Save it for the podcast. That's perfect. What you're talking about. That is absolutely perfect.